Hi, and welcome back to my channel. So it is Labor Day weekend, so that means this is my review of the Snyder Cut of Justice League. I took Friday off of work, so today is Sunday, so I watched it on Friday. I thought I was going to take a break because it is like 4 hours long. I didn't. I pretty much watched it all the way through on Friday, and I watched it again yesterday. And, I'm glad I took the day off from work. Now, I didn't take the day off of work specifically to watch this movie, but I kind of did. It was great. I loved it. So, me doing my review, as per usual, not comprehensive, just things I like. And I'm not really going to go over like the lore of how the Snyder Cut came about because I feel like that's out there. Everybody knows. Everybody thought that there was a Snyder Cut out there after Joss Whedon took over the project and people didn't like his version of Justice League and they petitioned and they got it. And honestly, really all it is like a director's cut, and people have gotten director's cuts before. Like for years, my family owned the director's cut of like Blade Runner on VHS, and I didn't even know that that's the version that we had. So it's like the director's cuts are a thing, Anyway, what I will say, like I said, I really liked it, is that this version, you can tell that it's more coherent and fits with Zack Snyder's, Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman. So, and I might watch the Batman versus Superman, like the special edition that has the extra footage too. I don't know. Depends on how I feel. But anyway, so with the Snyder Cut, like I said, it's 4 hours, and they did break it into 6 parts and an epilogue, which actually made it easier to watch. You didn't feel like you were watching 4 hours of it because they did it that way. So I broke it up into each section. I'm just going to talk about a few of my favorite things from each section. So hopefully we're not here like forever going over this. So, part 1. I loved how they showed that Superman's death at the end of Batman vs. Superman kind of like reverberated through the universe. And it awakened all of the mother boxes. So I really liked how they showed that during his death, you could see each mother box coming alive and everything. That was cool. I liked in the Joss Whedon version of Justice League, the Wonder Woman bank fight. I already liked that fight. I love how her theme comes in. I love like all of her action in that sequence, her blocking the bullets and everything. I already liked that scene. I liked it even more in this version. Not a whole lot to say other than that I really enjoyed that sequence, and I thought that it was great in the Snyder Cut. And then, of course, the battle on, I hope I don't butcher it, Themyscira. Look, I was supposed to get, I was tongue-tied when I was a kid. I was supposed to get it fixed. I didn't, so bear with me. Anyway, the point is the Amazon battle to protect their mother box. Again, a scene that I really liked in Joss Whedon's Justice League. I loved it even more in the Snyder Cut because it was more detailed, and the Amazons are just cool. What can you say? Especially the scene where like Steppenwolf is talking about like, I'm a bathe in your fear or whatever, and the queen is like, show him your fear, and they said, we have no fear, and then they commence with the beatdown. It's a wonderful sequence. Absolutely, absolutely love that whole, like I said, the detail that was in it, and I don't know, the Amazons are just cool. Who doesn't love the Amazons? I love that scene. Then part 2 is like where it shows like the battle of the heroes, Wonder Woman gets like that message from her mother that invasion is coming, and she goes to see Bruce Wayne, and she's telling him about the original battle with Darkseid, who is the actual villain in this version. In the theatrical version, it's Steppenwolf that's the main villain. In this one, he's more just like a henchman for the main villain off screen, which is Darkseid. But because this battle is this time with Darkseid, like it's way more intense and visually satisfying. Again, things that I already liked, but it's just that little bit of extra. It just made that scene so much more entertaining. Absolutely loved it. And that's pretty much the highlight for me from that section, part 2. And also that after the battle, like we already know that, the Amazons, the Atlanteans, and the human beings, all took a box to hide it. But I thought it was cool how they showed each group of people, like according to their traditions, like encasing it and then putting it away. I thought that was cool. All right, on to part three. Part three is interesting because you know how when you get a trailer and they show you scenes in the trailer and then you go and see the movie and you're like, where's that scene from the trailer? And, you know, obviously things get edited out. And Justice League is a perfect example of that because the introduction to Cyborg and the Flash in part three, the original trailer that I remember seeing for Justice League had the scenes that are in this part three, and then obviously when the theatrical version came out, those scenes were cut out. And I think in my head I was thinking, I wonder what happened. But so seeing this and seeing how they were supposed to play out was cool. So basically the part with the Flash that was in the trailer was him saving Iris West, who ends up being in that solo Flash movie. So that scene was in there. But the best part of part three, obviously, is the detailed version of Cyborg's backstory, which again, you saw bits and pieces of it in the trailer. And I don't know if I mentioned that I'm looking at my phone because I'm referring to notes, but I do that every time I do these, so it just occurred to me. Stay focused. Anyway, but yeah, I loved that backstory of him being like this, you know, star athlete, football player, genius, going to Gotham City University, showing that football game. And when he leaves the football game, him and his mom get in that accident that kills his mom. And then his dad, you know, makes the decision to try and bring him back. And just like that whole story arc showing what his life was before and what his father did to bring him back. And also that beautiful sequence where the father's trying to explain to him through that recording, you know, these are what your powers are. And then you see like Cyborg, like, you know, going really deep into like, you know, I don't know, cyberspace, whatever, exploring his capabilities. And just that wonderful sequence where you see that he helps this woman like financially because he can. And basically, you know, posing that question that happens like in almost every superhero movie. Once you get these extraordinary abilities, will you use them for good or evil? And obviously he uses them for good because he's a good person. And also Joe Morton plays his father, who is an underrated actor and I absolutely love, and he is outstanding in this movie. And obviously his role is expanded because the Cyborg story is expanded. So that was great. Also in part three is they show that battle for getting the Atlantis mother box. And again, just those extra details that it's like you already saw these scenes, but it's like, and I get that things have to be edited down, but it just made it more enjoyable. All right, there's a lot that I have in part four. So let's try and get through this. So in part four is basically when they're showing them trying to prevent Steppenwolf from getting the mother box from Earth. And it's funny because when they go to, because like the people have been kidnapped that, you know, work at Star Labs and they've been near the mother box. And when they go to rescue them, Flash is like nervous and he's talking about, wow, he wishes Superman was there. And it kind of reminded me, if you've seen Wakanda Forever, when Riri Williams and Shuri are kidnapped by Namor. And Riri Williams is joking like, oh, so y'all don't have no more Black Panthers when I get kidnapped? I don't know. That's what that reminded me of. I thought that was funny. But anyway, in that sequence, I absolutely love Wonder Woman's fight with Steppenwolf. Like, again, liked it in theatrical release. Really liked it in this version. I really like, anytime her theme comes up while she's fighting is great. And then obviously Cyborg going to rescue his dad and all the other people that were being held hostage, and the Flash helping him. And just like I said, that whole sequence of them rescuing them and like working together. And obviously that slow motion scene where the Flash is going into the Speed Force to help out Wonder Woman. That was great. I also thought it was cool that they showed that Cyborg can communicate with like technology now, because when they get to like the Batcave, he can talk to the ship and he figures out that the ship can't fly and he's talking to it. I thought that was great. Again, it kind of reminds me of another reference in The Empire Strikes Back where R2-D2 is talking to the Millennium Falcon's computer. I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was cool. And also when Cyborg is giving the backstory of how the mother box was found on Earth, that it was found after World War II, the Nazis found it, the Allied forces intercepted it, his father finding it, and then his father using it to bring him back. Also, with Joe Morton, the actor that plays his father, if I had a nickel for every time Joe Morton plays a scientist that messes with science that he shouldn't, I'd have 2 nickels. But it's strange that it happened twice. And what I'm referring to is, he was the scientist in Terminator 2 Judgment Day that was the main one responsible for Skynet coming to fruition. And it's just crazy that it's like, so you always playing a scientist messing with stuff that maybe you shouldn't mess with. That's hilarious to me. Anyway, and then also this has the section where like Lois's story is way different in this one than in theatrical release, because in the theatrical release obviously she's still grieving, but she keeps her job and she's still like kind of like in the land of the living, whereas in this version she's kind of like stopped in her grief. So there's this section where Martha Kent comes to see her and they're talking about their grief, and again it just happened to remind me of another scene which ironically is in another comic book movie, but in Wakanda Forever, when Okoye and Nakia are talking about how Nakia basically left Wakanda after T'Challa died. And both of the scenes have like this parallel of 2 women expressing their grief for losing someone. And they're specifically talking about the difference between the world mourning what the symbol was, i.e. mourning Superman or mourning Black Panther, versus them having this more personal experience where like Nakia and Wakanda Forever is talking about, to everyone he was Black Panther and king, but to me he was everything. Same kind of conversation being had with Lois and Martha, where Martha's talking about, the world is mourning Superman, a man they didn't know, but you and I know Clark, and that's who we're mourning. We're having this grief over him, and this extra burden in our grief because we're keeping the secret of who he really was. And then that scene ends on a very interesting twist, which I will circle back to later, but that's what that scene reminded me of. Okay, part 5, which might be one of the best parts because that's the part where they bring Superman back. So, the part when they're in the ship and they're getting ready to like resurrect Superman, and Cyborg is like, plugged into the ship, and the ship is like kind of like freaking out, like don't do this. If you do this is like irreversible and it's not advised, maybe you shouldn't. And they go ahead and do it anyway, and then he has that vision of what is going to happen possibly by bringing Superman back, and it's this dark world, and you see that Wonder Woman has been killed and Aquaman has been killed, and Superman loses Lois Lane, and Darkseid is influencing him, and then it's implied that he kills Batman. Just a whole, referencing back to that, premonition that Batman has in Batman vs. Superman. Just, yeah. And then I loved how at the end of it, then the computer says the future has taken root in the present. That's great. Superman's fight with the Justice League was even better in this version, and I already liked that fight in the theatrical version. It's just everything about that sequence when you see just like his raw like power as he's fighting all of these, superpowered beings. And of course nothing beats that scene where the Flash thinks that he's gonna get to him through the Speed Force, and as he's in the Speed Force he sees Superman like look at him with that side eye, and it just cracks me up because that actually happened to me in real life when I was in church. There's this woman at the church that my parents go to that does not like me, and we were doing communion, and the way they do communion is like each row goes up, and then the people that are like up on the roster and the ministers and stuff, they go last. So I'm sitting there, they're coming, like the ushers and all of them are coming down the aisle, and I just feel like someone's looking at me, and I look up and I swear she's doing the Superman side eye directly at me. I was like, ugh. So every time I see that scene, it reminds me of that. But anyway, that was awesome. And then his fight with Wonder Woman was the one that cracked me up the most, when they're doing like the headbutt. That's just hilarious. One, because it shows you how powerful Wonder Woman is, and 2, how it shows you that Superman is like in real time being like, oh, so you got some power too, let me recalibrate. And then of course he just knocks her smooth out. But that just is a funny sequence to me. Also, I think that this particular sequence showing him being resurrected shows what he would be like without the influence of his parents and Lois. Because people always act like this version, Snyder's version of Superman, is just like all powerful and has no humanity. But it's like what you see with him coming back and not like remembering who he is that having the parents that he did and having his relationship with Lois is what taught him humanity and to hone his powers and to have compassion, and that without these memories he really is just like an instrument of violence, and that his parents are the ones who gave him morals, and then like Lois brings him back. And I think it was interesting that Wonder Woman kept calling him Kal-El, but that's not how he lived his life. So her continuing to say that really didn't jog any memories for him or bring him back. It started with Batman calling him Clark, and then Lois obviously showing up that really like jolted him out of it and brought him back to himself. And then I also thought that it was great that like it's interesting. I had no idea that in this version Cyborg's dad was basically going to like sacrifice himself, but like I thought it was great that he knew how to mark that mother box so that they could find it, and that he was willing to sacrifice himself. Like, it's very sad because I did like that he survived in the theatrical version, but this one definitely adds a little bit more weight to it. And again, also kind of reminds me of the character in Terminator 2 sacrificing himself. It's interesting. Anyway, but yeah, that was just a very emotional scene, especially because, Cyborg has had this tense relationship with his dad up until this point, and, he figures out what his dad was trying to do to save the world. All right, part 6, which is kind of like the last, like, climactic part of the movie. When Clark is remembering himself in Kansas, again, they give it way more detail than they do in the theatrical version, where he actually goes into the house, he puts on, like, his old clothes, and he's, like, feeling and sensing all the memories in the house, and he's coming back to himself. And he's remembering that he wanted to propose to Lois, and he sees the ring, and he's like, I take that as a yes. And then his mom shows up, and they have this beautiful reunion. And I do like in the theatrical version where he can hear her before he sees her, but it's still just the fact of him being reunited with his mother, and then like the two most important women in his life. And that's, again, the reason why I love this Superman, because he loves those two women, and that's like his family. His whole world is his partner, Lois, and his mother. I love it. And then I remember people talking about like Superman being in like the black suit, and I really didn't know, like, again, things that were hinted at before the theatrical release came out, and then they edited it, so then you were like, whatever happened to that? Because I remember people talking about, yeah, there's stills of him in the black suit, and then it didn't happen. So essentially, that scene where Superman goes to get his new suit is my favorite scene of the Snyder Cut. It's my favorite scene, I think, of all the scenes of this version of Superman. It's just, I already loved, as you can tell in my review of Man of Steel, his relationship with his fathers, Jor-El and Jonathan Kent, and the fact that he's hearing their voices saying the things from the previous film, from Man of Steel, and then he finds the suit, and then it's basically like this callback to like his first flight in Man of Steel, and he puts on the new suit, and he's hearing the voices of his father, and then the last one is Jonathan Kent telling him it's time to fly, and then he takes off like in the first one, and the music from Man of Steel comes in. I love that scene. It is a wonderful scene, and he flies up into space and everything. Favorite scene of the whole movie. Favorite scene of, Henry Cavill's Superman, period. And then obviously during the climax in this version, it is like completely different than the other one, because in this one the mother boxes synchronize and form the unity, and then Darkseid comes, and basically the Flash now has to go back in time, and that whole sequence, just visually, emotionally, is just amazing to see him using his powers to literally turn back time. And then just like that moment where he's like talking to like his father because he doesn't know if he's gonna like make it. I love that sequence. I love that was the twist in this version, him being able to go back in time to help them separate the mother boxes, and just that whole sequence where Cyborg is like, he's connected with the unity, and I could tell automatically as soon as he saw that image of his parents and like himself not as Cyborg, that those were the mother boxes trying to trick him. So I thought that was cool that he saw through it and separated them, and you could tell that's what was happening. Okay. And then in the epilogue. So in the epilogue, I like that it's actually that recording of Cyborg's father giving like the ending monologue as opposed to Lois Lane in theatrical version. I like this one better. And I do like that it's like giving you subtle hints of things that are different in this version, like the part where Bruce Wayne buys the house back for, Superman's mom, which I love that scene. That's one of my favorite scenes of the movie. But also, like, the dialogue is slightly changed. Where in, like, a theatrical version, he's just basically joking about, yeah, I like to buy things. But in this version, it's like he's congratulating Clark because it's implied that Lois Lane is pregnant. So that was interesting. And I also thought that it was interesting that basically Bruce Wayne has another nightmare / premonition. Again, about Superman going crazy. Like, that whole sequence, that was buck wild. Like, and the Joker, I don't have a lot to say about that other than it was kind of jolting, like, oh, okay, we're going there again. It's interesting. And then of course it ends with the Martian Manhunter, who earlier you figured out that he was in it because that he was actually impersonating Martha going to see Lois, which I don't think takes away from the emotionality of the scene, but it's just interesting because it kind of implies that everybody knows that Lois is important because he had to kind of get her out of her funk because she had to be like present. And if she hadn't been like present and like kind of coming back to the land of the living, she wouldn't have been there. When Superman came back, so on and so forth. But I thought that was really interesting that he even understood how important she was, and then he showed up and told Batman like, "Yep, I'm here and I'm ready to help because Darkseid is going to return." Also, the fact that his like human identity was that general from like Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, that was a lot. It was interesting, but that's the end of the epilogue. And my final thoughts is that you can really tell with this Snyder cut, this director cut, that there was supposed to be more in the DCEU. It's obvious that this movie was like setting up, Justice League sequels, all of the solo films that were promised. Like Cyborg was supposed to have a solo film, and you know what happened there. The Flash, Ben Affleck's solo Batman movie, like all these things clearly were set up by this version. So it's a little bittersweet because you're never going to get it now. But it's interesting to finally have seen this version and know kind of where Zack Snyder was heading. And in that sense, I feel like it's like a trilogy. Like, by seeing this version, you definitely get like Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and the Snyder Cut of Justice League as a Superman trilogy. And I'm glad that this version exists so that you kind of see that complete vision, especially like all the callbacks to like the music from Man of Steel, which I love. But that's like, I really love this version of Superman. So it was nice to kind of see that in a way he got a complete trilogy of his journey in being Superman. And honestly, that's why I like the Snyder movies with Superman and Justice League, because I was not a Superman fan prior to seeing Man of Steel. So it's like, again, I feel like had I not seen these movies, had I not liked them, I wouldn't have even been inspired to care about this character. And it gave me another version of Batman to love, which I already love Batman. So yeah, that concludes this kind of unintentional review of like the Snyder movies. But going back and watching Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and seeing this Snyder cut of Justice League has just been so much fun for me. And I've really enjoyed it. And it just, again, reminded me why I like that version of Superman and why that helped me be interested enough to see the new version of Superman. So that kind of concludes my review of the Snyderverse, the DCEU. I had a great time. And if you have watched all the reviews that I gave of those movies, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.